Las Vegas in the 1970s wasn't just built on casinos and bright lights. It was built on blood, backroom deals, and bodies buried in the desert. Casino, Martin Scorsese's 1995 classic, gave us a glimpse into that world. But the real story? It's darker, messier, and deadlier than any Hollywood film could ever show. This is the untold story of Frank Cullotta, the mob enforcer turned government witness who lived the casino life for real. From robberies to murders, the hole-in-the-wall gang, to the downfall of Tony the Ant Spilotro, and the truth behind Frank and Geri Rosenthal. We're diving deep into the underworld that built and nearly destroyed Sin City. Health Wealth Diary presents the real story from the movie Casino. Frank Cullotta was born on December 14, 1938, in Chicago, Illinois. Raised on the tough streets of the Windy City's west side, Frank was surrounded by organized crime from a young age. His father, Joe Cullotta, was a getaway driver during the Prohibition era. Crime wasn't a choice, it was a way of life. Frank grew up near Grand and Ogden, a part of town crawling with mob influence. His father, Joe, was murdered when Frank was just 8 years old. Joe was running away from the cops, a shootout ensued, and Joe was shot multiple times. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Frank dropped out of school at age 12. His mother, Josephine, encouraged him to get a shine box and start shining shoes at the local taverns. Josephine wanted Frank to make an honest income and not follow in his father, Joe's footsteps. One day, as Frank was finishing up, a young kid approached him. The two exchanged words, and a scuffle ensued. The young man, also a shoeshine boy, was upset that Frank was moving in on his territory. That kid was Anthony Spilotro. After the shoving match was over, they went their separate ways. As they were walking away, young Tony asked Frank his name and warned him that he was to never return. Frank stood his ground and told him, "I'll be here tomorrow." The next day, Tony Spilotro approaches Frank again. This time, he wanted to know his father's name. Confused but also relieved, Frank tells him his name was Joe Cullotta. Tony responds by telling Frank that his father saved his father's life back in the day and that they now should be friends too. The two became inseparable. It wasn't long before they started stealing cars, robbing stores, and extorting local bookmakers. Frank was quiet, extremely smart, but don't let the nerdy glasses fool you, he was a savage. Tony had the usual case of Napoleon complex, short but ferocious, ready to explode at any given time, and together they were a force to be reckoned with. Unlike Frank's father Joe, Tony's father Pasquale Spilotro was a hard-working Italian immigrant who tried to raise his family the right way. He and his wife Antoinette owned and operated a popular Italian deli that was known for the best meatballs in Chicago. The Black Hand wasn't a formal organization, it was more of a method. It started in southern Italy, particularly Naples and Sicily, and was brought to the U.S. by early Italian immigrants in the late 1800s. It thrived in immigrant neighborhoods where fear, language barriers, and distrust of police made people vulnerable. By the early 1900s, the Black Hand had spread to major cities with large Italian populations: New York, Philadelphia, New Orleans, and especially Chicago. In Chicago, the Black Hand took root in Little Italy, centered around the West Side. The tactics were simple, but brutal. A letter would arrive at an Italian business or home, signed with a black hand print or symbol. The letter demanded money, often 100, 500, or more, which at that time was a fortune. If the victim didn't pay, threats followed, including letter bombs, shootings, kidnapping, and murder. And the threats weren't empty. Pasquale Spilotro left Bari, Italy, and arrived on Ellis Island in 1914. In the 1920s, his restaurant was the talk of the town, and that also attracted the Black Hand. Week after week, Patsy and his wife would receive threats from different men. They were dressed in nice, shiny suits and barely spoke English. But their demands were universal. Either pay or you will have a problem. One morning, a local gangster named Joe Cullotta, who was a regular at the restaurant, came in. He saw Patsy having words with two men dressed in nice, sharp suits. After they left, Joe noticed Patsy was in bad spirits. Joe asked Patsy what the problem was, and Patsy told him these men were extorting him. Joe told him that he doesn't need to pay them ever again and that he would handle the situation. Safe to say, he did. Those men never returned again, and that favor that Joe did decades ago for Patsy was the main catalyst for Tony and Frank's brotherhood. While Frank had no choice, being a criminal was the only way to survive. Tony had choices. His parents worked hard. But Tony looked up to the local gangsters that would frequent the family restaurant, and eventually he wanted in. He wanted to be part of the Chicago outfit. By the 1910s, Big Jim Colosimo had become a major power in Chicago. Tired of paying the Black Hand, he began using muscle to eliminate them, with help from his nephew, a young enforcer named Johnny Torrio, who would later mentor Al Capone. Jim Colosimo was a powerful man. He built a vice empire in Chicago's South Side. He ran prostitution houses, collected political protection, and eliminated the Black Hand. When Prohibition went into effect in 1920, Johnny Torrio pushed for the gang to enter into bootlegging, but Colosimo stubbornly refused. Months later, Colosimo was shot and killed by a hired hitman from Brooklyn named Frankie Yale. The order came from Colosimo's nephew, Johnny Torrio, who would later become the new boss. Johnny Torrio revolutionized the bootlegging business in Chicago. He created alliances with New York gangsters like Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. Torrio also recruited a young Al Capone, making him his top enforcer, and eventually giving Capone complete leadership of the outfit after a failed assassination attempt on his life. Johnny Torrio retired and moved to Italy in 1925. Al Capone, the original Scarface, took over the outfit with an iron fist. His reign brought unprecedented attention from federal agents and the media. He became the face of American organized crime, but that fame was also his downfall. Al Capone was convicted for tax evasion in 1931 and sentenced to 11 years in prison. He died in 1945 from heart failure due to syphilis that he caught decades earlier. Frank Nitti took over in the 1930s, and then Paul Ricca in the 1940s. In the 1950s, Tony Accardo took the wheel as the outfit boss. Accardo helped transition the outfit into legitimate businesses, such as casinos and the unions. He eventually stepped down as boss in 1957 and became the outfit's consigliere. After Accardo stepped down, Sam Giancana was the new boss. Giancana was charismatic and politically connected. Sources say he helped John F. Kennedy win the 1960 presidential election. Those same sources also say he was responsible for JFK's assassination as well. During the Giancana reign, the outfit saw massive gambling and narcotics profits. Giancana held the throne until the late 60s. He was murdered in 1975. After Giancana was exiled from the outfit in the late 60s, Joseph Aiuppa took over as new boss. Aiuppa was an old-school gangster known to be ruthless and unforgiving. Aiuppa oversaw the outfit during its peak control of the Teamsters unions and the casino skims. He was also responsible for sending Tony Spilotro to Las Vegas to oversee the casino skims. That mistake would cost Joseph Aiuppa his freedom, but we'll get into all that later. As the 1960s rolled in, the outfit had full control of Chicago, and they were watching the next generation of street muscle. Tony was the first to get noticed. He had already earned his stripes working under Mad Sam DeStefano and had a reputation for being willing to do anything, especially when it came to murder. In 1962, Tony became a made man, one of the few of the next generation allowed into the inner circle. he was officially part of the outfit. Frank? He didn't make the jump. While Tony went up the ranks, Frank stayed independent, still in the life, still dangerous, but not officially made. He pulled off burglaries, robberies, and worked with various crews across Chicago, sometimes even hitting targets Tony approved of. That same year, Frank was pulling robberies and home invasions with two local men known as the M&M Boys. William Billy McCarthy and James Jimmy Moralia were small-time burglars operating on the northwest side of Chicago. Both men were associated to Frank. Together, they were involved in over a dozen robberies all throughout Chicago. The duo would eventually get themselves into deep trouble after committing an unauthorized triple murder. Frank was now in trouble and guilty by association. Billy and Jimmy murdered Ronnie Scalvo and his brother Phil Scalvo, both connected to the outfit, at the Black Door Lounge, a mob-linked bar in Chicago. During the incident, they also murdered a waitress, which enraged mob higher-ups. Killing civilians was strictly off-limits. They had just signed their death certificates. Tony was dispatched to take care of the M&M Boys, but there was one problem: how do you find them? Tony knew they were associated to his old pal Frank, so Tony devised a plan. Have Frank set them up. Frank called up Billy and arranged a meeting at Mad Sam's house. There, Billy was ambushed by Tony and his crew. He was tortured and beaten half to death. To force him to give up Jimmy's whereabouts, Tony reportedly used a vise, clamping Billy's head inside and tightening it, similar to the infamous torture scene in the movie Casino. Jimmy was caught shortly afterward. Both bodies were found stuffed in the trunk of a car in suburban Chicago. The M&M murders were not just retaliation, they were a clear warning from the outfit about what happens when you cross the line. In the early 1970s, Mad Sam DeStefano became a liability to the outfit. He was arrested multiple times and faced charges including murder, extortion, and conspiracy. Eventually, Mad Sam would agree to testify against Chicago outfit members, including Tony. This was the last straw. On April 14, 1973, Mad Sam DeStefano was ambushed inside his garage. He was shot multiple times in the face and body at point-blank range with a shotgun. Many mob historians believe Tony and his brother Michael Spilotro may have either carried out the hit or sanctioned it. The case remains unsolved. By the late 60s, Frank had earned respect in Chicago. He carried out armed robberies, burglaries, and several murders for the outfit. Frank wasn't made, he was a connected guy, an associate trusted with sensitive work. Unlike the character Frank Marino in the movie Casino, who by the way was played by the classy and unforgettable Frank Vincent, who was portrayed as a loyal enforcer, the real Frank had deeper connections to murders and large-scale robberies, something sanitized in the film. In 1968, Frank was convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to 8 years in prison. He was released in 1974. In 1971, the outfit sent Tony to Las Vegas to oversee the skimming operations from casinos like the Stardust, Hacienda, and Fremont. Tony wasn't there to run the casinos. He was there to make sure the money flowed back to Chicago and that no one got greedy. Tony's job was also to protect childhood friend Frank Rosenthal, the sports betting genius who ran the casinos for the outfit. Frank Lefty Rosenthal grew up in a working-class Jewish family in Chicago's West Side. As a teenager, Frank developed a passion for sports and gambling, often skipping school to attend horse races. By his late teens, he was already working the Chicago racetracks, learning everything about betting odds, point shaving, and bookmaking. In the 1950s, Lefty began working with the Chicago outfit. He ran illegal sports books and betting operations. He became a master of odds manipulation, using statistics, insider tips, and under-the-table deals to control outcomes. He allegedly fixed dozens of college basketball games during this time by bribing players. Lefty was the golden goose in the eyes of the outfit. In the early 1970s, the outfit moved much of its illegal income from Chicago, Kansas City, Milwaukee, and Cleveland into Las Vegas casinos to be skimmed off the top. Lefty was sent to manage these casinos, but he had one problem. Lefty couldn't get a gaming license due to his criminal past, so he was given phony job titles such as food and beverage manager, entertainment director, and sportsbook manager. But behind the scenes, he ran everything. Similar to the character Sam Rothstein in Casino, who was played by Hollywood legend Robert De Niro, Lefty was also a straightforward, no-nonsense type of guy that demanded things to be done his way. When Tony went to Las Vegas, he had one job, and one job only: protect the skim. But Tony didn't want to just watch over Vegas, he wanted to own it. Tony set up shop in Vegas like a general and began taking control the old-fashioned way, with fear. He quickly made a name for himself, not just as an enforcer, but as a wild card. He shook down loan sharks, bookies, you name it. And if they didn't listen, they disappeared in the Nevada deserts. In the movie Casino, Joe Pesci's character Nicky Santoro serves the role of Tony Spilotro. In the film, Santoro's bad temper gets him banned from most Las Vegas casinos, and according to Frank, Tony also had a notorious anger problem. Tony forgot one of the mob's golden rules: stay low, stay quiet. But in Vegas, he was turning up the heat. The violence he brought to Vegas drew FBI attention. Tony's name began surfacing in federal surveillance, wiretaps, and court documents. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police formed a Tony Spilotro squad to monitor him full-time. By the mid-70s, Tony was running the streets of Vegas like a mob kingpin, extorting businesses, whacking informants, and building his own little empire. But he was alone. He needed someone loyal, someone he could trust with his life. So who did he call? Who else but his old pal, Frank Cullotta. Frank had been running wild in Chicago and was wanted for multiple crimes. Vegas offered a new start and, more importantly, new opportunities to make money. Frank moved to Vegas in 1978 and quickly became Tony's right hand again. They formed the Hole in the Wall Gang, a crew of professional burglars who specialized in crashing through ceilings and walls of jewelry stores, high-end homes, and casinos. The Hole in the Wall Gang wasn't just a random group of crooks, they were professionals. They used their unique method of entry, breaking through walls or ceilings, avoiding security alarms and camera systems, and then making off with loot, ranging from jewelry to cash. These were not small-time burglaries. The gang had a sharp eye for valuable targets, often planning their heists with military precision. The gang consisted of Joe Blasco, Leo Guardino, Ernie DeVino, Larry Newman, and Wayne Matecki. Each had their own area of expertise, but collectively, they formed a formidable group that became known for their quick getaways, ability to evade capture, and connections within the Las Vegas underworld. Sherwin Jerry Lisner was a small-time criminal and associate of Frank's in Las Vegas. In July 1979, he was arrested on theft charges and posted bail. Lisner reportedly intended to testify before a federal grand jury and reveal details about the Hole in the Wall Gang. Tony had deep connections, and when he received the phone call that Lisner was testifying against them, he gave Frank the order to have Lisner whacked. On October 1979, Frank met with Lisner at his home. Frank went alone, while Wayne Matecki waited outside in a getaway vehicle. When Lisner invited him inside, Frank opened fire with a .22 caliber handgun, intending to keep it quiet. The first shots didn't finish the job. Lisner ran through the house. Frank pursued, attempting to strangle him with a water cooler cord, which snapped. Matecki entered with another magazine. Frank reloaded, placed a couch pillow over Lisner's head for silence, and fired multiple times. The body was dragged to Lisner's backyard pool, pushed in, and the house was cleaned of fingerprints and evidence. Tony's relationship with Lefty, whom he knew since they were kids in Chicago, began to sour in Las Vegas. This was mostly due to jealousy. You see, Lefty was popular and very much loved in Vegas, and Tony was not. And the unwanted FBI attention that Tony was getting also didn't help the situation. Lefty had his own issues with the Gaming Control Board, and Tony's reckless behavior would only jeopardize Lefty's chances of ever getting a casino license. But Lefty had bigger problems than just a casino license. His marriage to Geri McGee was falling apart, and Tony was right in the middle of it all. Geri McGee was born into poverty. She helped support her chronically ill mother and infant daughter Robin by taking odd jobs, even selling her own clothes to get by. By 1960, she'd moved to Las Vegas, working as a cocktail waitress in the day and a showgirl at the Tropicana at night. She hustled high rollers, earning up to $300,000 a year, enough to buy her family a home and become self-sufficient. Still, she never lost her hunger for attention, for money, or for status. When Lefty met Geri, it was love at first sight. He swept Geri off her feet, opening a safe deposit box with $250,000 cash and jewels for her, just in case the marriage didn't work out. They married on May 4, 1969, and soon had 2 children, Stephen and Stephanie. Early on, their relationship was glamorous, but cracks appeared. Geri could not settle into domestic life. She continued partying, drinking, and running with high-rolling gamblers. Geri would also take trips back to Los Angeles and meet with her old boyfriend Lenny Marmer, who was also the father of Geri's first child, Robin. Their home life dissolved into private investigators, frequent brawls, threats, and temporary separations. By late 1978, Geri's erratic behaviors, excessive drinking, partying, and absences had already strained her marriage. She began spending significant time with Lefty's old pal and supposed protector, Tony Spilotro. Upon discovering the betrayal, Lefty was immediately aware of the peril. In the mafia world, sleeping with another man's wife, especially someone still tied to a powerful associate, is an unforgivable violation. The betrayal exploded once it hit the tabloids and FBI surveillance tapes. Vegas lawmen and media seized on the scandal, publishing details that made national headlines. Similar to the scene in the movie Casino, where Frank goes back to Chicago to hand the outfit bosses the skim money, and the bosses question Frank about Tony's affair with the Jew's wife. According to Frank, the Chicago bosses were fully aware of the affair, but Frank remained loyal to Tony. He dismissed the accusations, stating it was all fabricated by the media. Frank would later admit in interviews that Tony had a history of affairs with wives of associates. When his friends would go to jail or on the run, he would visit the wives and bring them groceries as a cover. Then he would have sex with them. Safe to say, Tony was a scumbag. The beginning of the end was in 1981, when the Hole in the Wall gang attempted to burglarize Bertha's Gifts and Home Furnishings, a high-end store in Las Vegas. The robbery was a bust. The gang was arrested in and around Bertha's. Each man was charged with burglary, conspiracy to commit burglary, and attempted grand larceny. In 1982, Frank was approached by the FBI with a wiretap of Tony talking with someone about, "We have to clean our dirty laundry," which Frank took as an insinuated contract on his life. Frank felt betrayed. He had put his life on the line for Tony numerous times, and now Tony wanted him dead. Later that year, Frank turned state's witness and told the feds everything. Frank told them about the Hole in the Wall gang's robberies, the murders he committed for Tony, and, last but not least, the mob's skimming from Vegas casinos. In return, Frank was given full immunity for his previously uncharged crimes. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but only ended up doing 2. Frank was paroled to the Witness Protection Program in 1984. He spent 2 years under an assumed name in the program, moving around from state to state, including Texas, Colorado, Mississippi, and Alabama. The Frank Marino character in Casino was as loyal as can be, but in reality, Frank Cullotta was loyal until the walls came closing in. In the mafia world, everybody is your enemy, and everybody is out for themselves. On October 4, 1982, Lefty walked out of Tony Roma's restaurant on Sahara Avenue and got into his Cadillac Eldorado. As he turned the ignition, a bomb exploded under his car. Miraculously, he survived. The reason? The Eldorado had a steel plate under the driver's seat, part of a manufacturer recall, which absorbed most of the blast. No one was ever charged, but Tony was widely believed to be behind the hit. A few weeks later, Jerry McGee collapsed in the lobby of the Beverly Sunset Hotel in Los Angeles. She would die 3 days later. She was 46 years old. The coroner ruled it accidental, a lethal mix of cocaine, Valium, and whiskey. Her sister later suggested she may have been silenced. After all, Jerry knew too much about Vegas's skimming and corruption. The cause, though unproven, remains a haunting possibility. Lefty left Vegas shortly after. He settled in California, then Florida, raising their 2 children and working as a betting consultant. Frank Lefty Rosenthal passed away in 2008 at age 79, doing so quietly, far from the strip he once ruled. But for decades he spoke fondly of Jerry in interviews, stating, "She was the love of my life." In September 1983, Tony was indicted for conspiracy in the Sherwin Jerry Lisner murder. At a trial in October of that year, Frank admitted that he was involved in over 300 crimes, including 4 murders, perjury, robberies, and burglaries. He also testified that Tony, his boss in Las Vegas, ordered him to make a telephone call that lured one of the M&M boys, William Billy McCarthy, to his murder. Tony was acquitted of all charges. In January 1986, following a prison sentence for outfit boss Joseph Ayupa for the casino skim, the Chicago outfit set up a meeting. Senior members discussed Tony's reckless behavior in Vegas. The decision was unanimous for his death. On June 14, 1986, Tony and his brother Michael left Michael's home in Oak Park, Illinois. The brothers were summoned to a basement in Bensonville for what they thought was Michael's induction ceremony to become a made man. When Tony entered and realized something was wrong, he asked if he could say a prayer. Before Tony could finish his prayer, the brothers were beaten, punched, kicked, strangled, while restrained. After their deaths, the bodies were moved to a cornfield in Indiana and buried. In the movie, the brothers were beaten with bats and buried alive, obviously. Hollywood added its own touch. Frank was also depicted in the movie as the one who turned on Tony and assisted in the murder. In actuality, Frank was long gone and in witness protection. After leaving the witness protection program, Frank made a bold decision to come out of hiding and return to Las Vegas, the city that made him infamous. Frank's re-emergence wasn't about going back to crime. It was about setting the record straight. In 1995, Martin Scorsese released Casino, a film based on the real-life mob control of Las Vegas. Scorsese wanted more than Hollywood fiction. He wanted authenticity. Frank was hired as a technical advisor for the film. He even coached actors like Joe Pesci on how to move, dress, and think like Tony Spilotro. In the 2000s, Frank reinvented himself once again, this time as a mob historian and a tour guide. He launched Frank Cullotta's Casino Tour, guiding tourists through the real-life locations where crimes depicted in the movie really happened, often telling stories only he could tell. By 2020, Frank had settled into a calmer life. He still gave occasional interviews, sold signed copies of his books, and even became a podcaster on YouTube with his channel, Coffee with Cullotta. But in August of that same year, while in a Las Vegas hospital for a routine illness, Frank contracted COVID-19. His health declined rapidly. On August 20th, Frank Cullotta passed away at the age of 81. He died in the same city he helped corrupt and later helped cleanse. In the end, the story of Frank Cullotta and the Las Vegas underworld is more than a tale of crime and greed. It's a story of loyalty, betrayal, and transformation. Las Vegas was once carved out of desert rock by dreamers, drifters, and gangsters. Men like Frank "Lefty" Rosenthal ran the tables. Men like Tony Spilotro enforced the rules in blood. And men like Frank Cullotta lived with 1 foot in the shadows and 1 foot in survival. And as for Las Vegas, it keeps rolling the dice. What do you think? Was Frank Cullotta a survivor who did what he had to do? Or just another criminal trying to rewrite his story? And do you think Las Vegas would have ever become what it is today without the influence of the mob? Leave a comment below and let us know what you think. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like. And also subscribe and hit the notification bell for more from the Health Wealth Diary.